Welcome in to the Skol Purple podcast as we are previewing the Bears and Vikings matchup with Kevin Lapka of the Bears Nation podcast. As you see there on the left, Kevin, how are you doing? Good to have you with us here this evening. How are things going?
I'm doing well, Tony. Carson, thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to talk some Bears Vikings, although it may not be the most intriguing matchup here in Week 18, at least for my squad. It'll be good to talk to you guys. You guys do a lot of good stuff, so excited to be here.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I wanted to play a clip from the press conference of Patrick Jones II, who was a teammate of Damar Hamlin's back at Pitt. I wanted to share that with our audience here and talk briefly about the Damar Hamlin incident that occurred on Monday night.
What was going through your mind Monday night when you watched that? I'm sure it's a tough thing to watch when it's a teammate and a friend, but just take us through kind of your emotions of it and what your reaction to it was when you saw it.
In my mind, like I ain't never really seen nothing like that happen before. So initially, it just really caught me off guard. I didn't really know what was going on, but I was just kept saying on my mind like he gonna get up, he gonna get up, he gonna get up, and then I just saw how the whole thing played out, and then instantly I just started praying for him and just thinking of his family and just keeping everybody in my prayers, just hoping that it wasn't anything like it was, and just that it would just be better. But I just kept keeping him in my prayers and his family too.
Once again, that is Patrick Jones, and he is he was a teammate of Damar Hamlin's back at Pitt when they played there. Tony, I'm going to toss it to you first. What were your thoughts? Actually, funny enough, or maybe not, I guess, but you and I were on the phone when this actually happened. We were talking about things, and I guess I was in a hotel. Long story with that. That's not important, but I had put my iPad down, and all of a sudden I picked it back up, and there was an ambulance on the field. I was like, "What is going on here?" And then you and I proceeded to check out Twitter and find out what was going on. What are your thoughts now that there's been a couple of days since that incident?
Yeah, man. As you mentioned, we were on the horn talking football, talking strategy, probably talking a little bit about what we wanted to talk about with Kevin here tonight. And of course, we're gonna flip on the tube, see what's going on Monday Night Football. And it was like, okay, what am I just gonna watch 10 minutes of commercials? What's going on? And and then it brought us back to the field, and yeah, there's just by the time I caught it, there's no players out there. I had to scramble to figure out what's going on. Obviously, then I go out to the Twitterverse and saw the replay about a billion times. So yeah, I mean, it's just scary stuff. I've talked to a few friends that are former players, whether they be just college football and people that have played football at a high level. And the general consensus I get from them is, look, we're used to seeing injuries like, and I mean myself, like I blew out an ACL myself. I've seen some bad stuff. I've seen somebody get knocked out cold with a concussion, right? But I've never seen somebody lose the ability to breathe on the field. That's just, it's a whole nother realm of severity when you're talking about a life and death situation. And I think that's where the line between real life and entertainment just completely gets wiped away. And I think that's why it was so jarring for so many people. Because like I'm sure both of you, I turn on football, I shut my brain off, I have fun, I watch the game, I'm critical, I'm saying dumb stuff on Twitter probably. But at the end of the day, it's I kind of separate the entertainment and real life, and in that moment, it became very real very quickly. And I mean, no way they were going to be able to play that game. Glad obviously they didn't even attempt to. So we'll see where they go from here.
Yeah, I just kind of once I saw what happened and that just kind of sunk in a little bit. It just kind of took my breath away, which I think it did for many of the players and many of the other people that were watching on TV and in the stadium. It just puts all of this into perspective, that everything we're doing, like even this show, like we're talking about players that, they play a game, but they, at the same time, they are as much a human being as all of us on this show right now. And it's hard to sometimes look at it that way when we're just talking about them like they're kind of otherworldly, like they're kind of on their own planet almost with fame or whatever. But they are just as much of a human being as we are, and it's hard. I think Ryan Clark really did a great job on ESPN the other night, just talking about how the one thing that he added at the end, which is so spot on, of I think the next time we're talking about our fantasy players and fantasy championships and all that, I think we're going to maybe get a little bit more of a perspective on how little that means compared to a situation like this. And I think that's kind of where I go too. It's like all of this, like even the game itself, like, yeah, we were excited to watch Bills and Bengals, the possible preview of the AFC Championship game. And unfortunately, it didn't happen, but it's it's more important that that man is, as of right now, as we record this on Wednesday evening, he is still alive. He's in critical condition, but he is still alive, fighting for his life. And yeah, just hoping for the best for him. I would highly suggest praying, obviously, for one. And another thing is, I had donated to his toy drive, which I know a lot of people, I think last I heard, over $5.5 million have been donated to his toy drive, which is amazing. And I would suggest if you want to do something, that would be a great thing to do as well. But Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's cool to see tragedies like this unite people in a sense, right? In such a divided space that the NFL is and the world is, to see everybody kind of come together for a good cause here and support him in that way, I think has been really special. And it's going to change things. I hope and pray that he's okay. But, you look at the long-term effects of something like this, you're right. As far as, people who are quick to dehumanize athletes, they're not going to be so quick to do it anymore, right? With things that they say, on the internet. And these players feel it, man. This is a big moment for them. Jaquan Brisker was a DNP today for the Chicago Bears, and it's because he trains with Damar Hamlin. I believe, I assume. He was out with a personal reason. I assume that is why. I'm actually friends with Jaquan Brisker's trainer, who would always talk about Damar Hamlin and some of the other guys around the league. So those guys were close, and it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is on Sunday, right? You'll see a lot of tributes, but it's an emotional thing to step on a field knowing that the last time an NFL team was on the field, something like this happened, and it could happen to anyone. I mean, Damar Hamlin was a human who had no cardio issues, and it was the commotio cordis, just a freak injury, but it's going to be interesting to see how it affects these guys. I know it's affected them emotionally, and we're praying that Damar is okay, and hopefully he comes out of this, all right. It'll be a long road for him for sure, but he's definitely got the strength to do it. So that's all I got to say about that, man. Praise up for Damar Hamlin for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really appreciate everybody tuning in for this. We are going to do our best to transition here. We are going to have the theme and intro here to Vikings Bears.
The Minnesota Vikings have brought joy and misery to the Vikings fans for many years. At the Skol Purple Podcast, we just want to see the Vikings party with the Lombardi. Join us for analysis, interviews, laughs, and much more. It's the podcast by Vikings fans for Vikings fans. The Skol Purple Podcast starts now.
Once again, welcome you in to the podcast. Once again, we're joined by Kevin Lapka of the Bears Nation podcast. And Kevin, let's get your thoughts here, first of all, on the Bears season to this point. It's been obviously a disappointment, I would guess, from your perspective. But one thing I would say about the Bears season, I thought that they would be bad, but I thought that they would not be as competitive as what they've been in some of these games. I think that's maybe the most impressive thing. Obviously, haven't been able to put those competitive games into wins, but I've been impressed with the Bears' pluckiness, if you will. Unfortunately for you guys, it hasn't resulted in great success in the win-loss column, but now you're fighting for the number 1 overall pick. So some good news in that regard, right?
That is exactly why this season is an overwhelming success. Well, it's one of two reasons, right? You're in play to get a draft pick, and the return that they could possibly get for that draft pick is going to be one of the biggest in NFL history because the leverage that they hold, not needing to take a quarterback, and given the Texans, if they were at 2 wanting to take Bryce Young, what people would give up to move ahead of the Texans to take Bryce Young if they have him as a highly coveted prospect. I don't think Bryce Young is a prospect that's any greater than what Justin Fields was in 2021 or Trevor Lawrence. I don't think he's a generational prospect, but in that sense, they're going to get a huge return for that. So that's reason number one is you're going to end this year with the number 1 overall pick, and that's going to change the trajectory of your franchise if you trade down or even if you do draft Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. But of course, number one is because you saw Justin Fields improve. You saw your franchise quarterback take a leap and come into his own. Obviously, there's been bumps in the road, last week being one of them, but given the context, given what he's had to work with his receivers, with the injuries that he's had, with the offensive line being one of the worst pass blocking units in the NFL, and still being able to produce points, 25 total touchdowns on the year, that's exactly what this season was all about. This season was never supposed to be about the playoffs. I thought they could potentially sneak in somehow at the start of the year if everything went right, and they've had a ton of one-score games. If the ball bounced their way a couple times, maybe they could, have gotten in a year where the last wild card team was 8-9, right? I thought that was a possibility at the start of the season, but ultimately it was always about how does your year 2 quarterback develop in a new offense with Luke Getsy, with a new head coach, and with all that he has to work with? And for the most part, it's been an overwhelming success. So there's going to be a lot of people outside of the Bears who look at a 3-13 record and ultimately 3-14 record after this week and say, well, how can you say that a 3-14 season is a success? How could you be that stupid? Well, in this situation, given what the Bears have and the amount of salary cap space that they have going in next year, they have all ability in the world to win 9 games next year, to be a good enough team late in December, at least, to be playing meaningful games in December, to where it's possible, right? So it's an overwhelming success. I know a lot of people aren't going to tell you that, but given the way Justin Fields has played, I thought he was a borderline Pro Bowl quarterback for a majority of the year, especially in the middle chunks of the season. We are happy as Bears fans for the most part, and we are rooting hard for the Houston Texans on Sunday to beat the Indianapolis Colts and try to help us get the number 1 overall pick. So those are my quick reactions on the Bears season. We're doing just fine. We're not collapsing over here, man.
Well, the good news is to help your number 1 overall pick hopes, you have one of the greatest quarterbacks to help with those hopes in Nathan Peterman on Sunday.
Correct. Yes, you guys are in for a treat. You guys are in for an absolute treat watching Nathan Peterman on Sunday. Man, what was it? How many interceptions did he throw in that game with Buffalo? Was it 4 or 5? I want to say
I think it was like 5. Yeah.
Was it? Did he get up to 5 that one time? It was like 2019. Oh
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. It's not been a good career for Nathan Peterman, but I think that's, and we were talking before the podcast, it would be nice if the Vikings would just go ahead and bench their starters for this game, because honestly, they could have a good chance of winning this game even if their starters don't play. Just because I don't think the Bears are trying that hard to win this game, or Eberflus probably would say that they are, but let's be honest here. If you're trotting out Nathan Peterman, you're not really sending a let's go win this thing kind of a signal. But I want to just say that I think the Bears, there are 2 teams in this division that scare me the most over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's not the Vikings or the Packers. Obviously, I don't get scared if the Vikings are my team unless they are in a playoff game. But but I want to say that the Bears are probably number 2 on the list of teams in this division. I have the Lions as like the highest upside moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years based on how much cap flexibility they have. Maybe not as much as the Bears, but they have 2 first-round picks this year and next year. Is that right? Next year too? Maybe not next year, but they do for this year. And the Lions already have a talented roster that's fighting to get into the postseason. So maybe this is the Bears from a year from now. But I really like the Lions' direction, and I really think if the Bears can do similar things to what the Lions have done, if they can get the proper free agents this offseason, and if they can draft accordingly, they've got a bright future as well. So that's why I would say I'm a little bit afraid of the Bears and the Lions in the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe not as much this year and next year, but after that, I like the Vikings and Packers. They have really bad cap situations going forward. So that's where I'm concerned with both of those teams. But Tony, any thoughts on the Bears season as a whole? I guess before we talk more matchup here.
Yeah, I mean, you guys both kind of hit the nail on the head. I can't really add too much to it. I think the Bears have a young roster. They certainly have holes to fill, like every single roster that's out there. The biggest question mark coming into the season was Justin Fields. How is he going to adapt? Is he going to take a leap this year? I think, from an outside perspective, I have seen some good things. Obviously, there are still things that I think he needs to work on. But there's enough talent there where I think they can build around him. I think that was at least one thing that was answered this year. Is he talented enough to start to build a team around? Because I feel like there were a lot of question marks after last year where it was, do we need to burn it all down to the ground again and start over? And at least, maybe from an outside perspective, Kevin, that's where we were kind of thinking, like, are they going to need to burn it down again? Maybe inside the fan base, it wasn't so much that way. But I think he's answered that question this year. I think he's earned the right to demand that he has some talent around him. At the end of the day, imagine a Justin Fields with a Justin Jefferson, or a Justin Fields with a Dalvin Cook, T.J. Hawkinson tandem,
Devontae Adams,
just something, right? Some top tier talent to siphon from, and I think that if he were to have some more talented skill players with him, we would see him blossom even more, which I know is a little cliche because, like, what quarterback wouldn't? Daniel Jones. But at the end of the day, I do think that there is some promise there. They've been fun to watch. I think we can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya with our hatred of the Packers. I don't mind seeing teams like Chicago or Detroit become competitive teams, have competitive games with our squad, the Vikings. I mean, of course, I want my teams to win, but when we're not playing the Bears, when we're not playing Detroit, I don't mind rooting for those teams. I'll be honest, if Detroit gets into the playoffs, boy, I'm going to be the biggest Detroit fan. Unless they play the Vikings, I'm going to be the biggest Detroit Lions fan there is, I swear. So I might go buy a jersey. I might not. But that's all I'm saying.
Whoa.
Tony. I don't mind, the other teams in the division. It's just, I just think there's a little bit with the Packers, especially fans and organization, probably more with the fans. There's I call it the Patriot effect, where they've just been good for a long time. So they've kind of been thumbing their nose at all of us for so long that, like, they can't be surprised when we're just rooting for their downfall. Like, you can't act like your you-know-what doesn't stink for 30 years and expect all of us just to take it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think I still don't cheer for the Bears when we're not playing them, but the Lions, I can get behind that. I can get behind that. The Packers,
those are fighting words.
The Packers are obviously number one on the you know what list, if you will, but I think the Bears would probably be number two in terms of division. There are other teams I dislike more than the Bears. I will say that, though. Eagles, but that's a debate for another day.
Saints.
Kevin.
Yeah,
that's another one. Kevin, what are your overall thoughts on this game? I know, obviously, your quarterback, Nathan Peterman, coming into this game, things are probably not, super looking good, but do you think the Bears will at least kind of like they have all season, be competitive in this game. Here's the thing: the Bears were more competitive against the Philadelphia Eagles than the Minnesota Vikings were back in week 2. Like that's crazy to say, but it's true. Like it really is, and I feel like I need to bite my tongue after saying it, but it is true. So, what are your thoughts on this Bears team as they host the Vikings? A Vikings team, by the way, that struggled to gain their footing, as you saw on the YouTube channel yesterday and our social media. We talked about that, how the Lambeau turf had an effect on the Vikings offense, which the Vikings should have been prepared for. Hopefully, they're prepared for the Bears turf, which is probably worse than the Lambeau turf, by the way. But go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the trend for this team when you talk about keeping games close, right? They were in a lot of one-score games. They beat the Patriots on the road. In Foxborough, they played a lot of close games with good teams, right? The Vikings being one of them. That was a close game back at US Bank Stadium earlier in the year, right, where Amir Smith-Marset was the double agent and threw that one away for us. We all remember that.
It was a great day.
Yeah, no, not for me, man. Oh God, they cut him the next day. That was the funniest part. Is they cut him. Or maybe it was the next week. I don't know. They cut him a couple days after. But the trend had been that, the Bears, not a good football team. Everybody knew that. But the quarterback was good enough to elevate the team to a point where they could be close with good teams. And more importantly than that, they would fight in all these games despite their record, right? They'd play hard. The Eberflus hits method was showing itself on the field. They were playing till the final minute, right? And that was the case up until last week. Last week, everything changed. I went into that game saying, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears go in a controlled environment, in a dome. Justin Fields is a better rusher in a dome. He doesn't have to deal with, sub-zero temperatures like he did against the Bills and the Eagles. I thought they'd go in and make that game close and almost win it. And they just showed zero effort in that game. And I got this feeling that they are just about checked out, man. And you could tell Justin put up 105 rushing yards in the first quarter. And after that, he was like, I'm done, man. He was tired. He was hurt. A lot of other guys were hurt and tired. And you just saw a just completely different team last week from an effort standpoint. And that's not going to change this week, right? They put a bunch of guys on IR already. They put their right guard, Tevin Jenkins, on IR. They put, Michael Schofield on IR, another offensive lineman. They are going to crawl into this game, wait till you guys get up 17-0, do their thing for the rest of the game. You guys are going to pull your starters at halftime, I'm sure, and they just can't wait to get this season over with and start the process for 2023. They're completely checked out. That's the biggest storyline, honestly, is because, again, the NFL is weird, right? And at home in Chicago, people are going to show up to the game anyway because Chicago's fans are stupid and it's not going to be that cold. And if they have an excuse to drink on Sunday and tailgate, they're going to do it. So they'll be there. They'll be rowdy. And a lot of the games that they've kept close have been at home. You think about those games on the road, they've been a little bit more of a disparity in scoring. But you think about the Niners game earlier in the year and the Eagles game, right? A lot of those games are close. Like, if Fields was playing this game and they hadn't shown the effort that they showed last week and they had been playing with the same effort, since up to week 16, I would have said they can come into this game with a chance to win if the Vikings are kind of looking past them and looking into the playoffs already, if there's not much to play for. But that completely changed with Peterman there and the way that this team has operated in the past week. And you can just get the feeling in the way that they've answered questions at press conferences and the moves that they've made and the way that Eberflus has talked and the way that Fields has talked. They are done. They're ready, man. They're ready to go. So they've been a horrible defensive team already, but you guys are going to easily jump out to a 21-0 lead, something significant. It is not going to be close, and it's for your benefit, right? Because you saw Jalen Hurts injure his shoulder on this same exact grass a couple weeks ago. Although it's only going to be what I think like 32, 33 degrees on Sunday, that Soldier Field grass, even when it's 32, it is hard, man. And you take a hard hit to that ground on the wrong spot, you could go out. And considering you guys aren't going to get the first round, there's no way you guys get the first round bye, right? And I don't think there's a scenario.
No, we could get the number 2 seed is the best we could do.
Right,
Yep.
so you're guaranteed to play next week unless, of course, they somehow put that Bills-Bengals game in between and give you guys sort of a de facto bye there. Then you guys should be looking at this game as coming out healthy. That's the number one thing because you know how it is to lose one player and how that can change the trajectory of your playoffs. It happened to the Bears in 2018. final game or close to final game of the season, Eddie Jackson intercepts Aaron Rodgers to clinch the division. He twists his ankle. They don't have him for the game against the Eagles, and it was a significant impact in that game. So, I'm looking for that too. I don't want anybody to get hurt. No one wants to get hurt in Week 18. It's stupid. A lot of these guys are playing for contracts. It's going to affect how they approach free agency. So, lackadaisical effort. It's going to be a poor game from an effort standpoint from us, and hopefully everyone comes out clean, though.
So what you're saying, Kevin, is that maybe, just maybe, the Vikings have their second not one-score win of the season. Because we only have one.
Right. And the point differential number is crazy. What's it down to 19 right now?
I think it might be. Is it 19? I was going to say it might be negative after that.
It is negative 19.
It is.
19,
it's negative 19.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes, this will be your
Thanks,
second non-one-score game of the season.
Yeah, and the first one came in week 1.
Man, it's just it's unbelievable, right? The question I have for you guys, honestly, is like, is it more of a, because I see this take all the time, well, it's a testament to the way they play late and how they perform in clutch moments. Do you guys see it that way, or is it more of this team they just can't put a team away? Like, is it a positive thing or a negative thing for you? Because there are people out there who see it as a positive thing of, hey, they can close games, and that's important to do in the playoffs, but I just can't see it that way.
Carson, do you want to go first? You want me to go first on this one?
I'll go first, I guess. So Phil Mackey of Purple Daily, he put out a stat this week of Kirk Cousins' performance in 3 situations. 1 being when the Vikings are in the lead, 2 when the Vikings are trailing, and 3 when the Vikings are tied with their opponent. And those statistics, he put those together based on the Kirk Cousins, Vikings Kirk Cousins since 2018. And what he found when he did that was he found that Kirk Cousins was one of the best quarterbacks. I think he was like top 2, top 3, one of the best quarterbacks in the league when he is tied with an opponent, which is mind-boggling, which is great. And he is like 12th or 14th when he's trailing, 12th or 14th in some statistics. I think it was completion percentage along with passer rating or something like that. And top of the league when trailing, kind of in that 10 to 12, 14 range when they are when they're trailing, and then top of the league when they're tied. And then when the Vikings have a lead is when he starts to get a little bit more conservative, doesn't take as many chances, starts to say, okay, well, we don't want to blow this lead, or we don't want to give the other team a first and goal or big play or whatever. So then he starts to take less chances, and he ranks in the 30s with passer rating and completion percentage, I think is what the stats were. I may be misquoting that, but basically saying that Kirk Cousins plays poorly when the Vikings have a lead, which I think is part of the reason why we're seeing the Vikings maybe be successful this season, is because a lot of the times they're trailing or they're tied with their opponents, or it's a close game. And it's weird to say that, but I think that might be part of the reason why they can't pull away, to what you were saying there, Kevin. And I think that's part of it. And, they have been clutch in those moments in the fourth quarter, but I would say, I think Tony would agree with me on this. It seems like the Vikings just cannot pull away from these teams. Like there's moments in the game where, the defense gets a stop and then the offense goes 3 and out, or the defense gives up a touchdown and the offense also goes 3 and out. Like it just, or then the offense decides to start going again after the defense gives up a touchdown. So it just seems like it's this endless cycle of no complimentary football being played by either side. And I think part of it maybe has to do with Kirk Cousins. Maybe it has to do with Kevin O'Connell and a first-year coach and first-year offensive coordinator, and Ed Donatel, who will probably be fired the day after the Vikings season ends. So long way of saying there's a lot of factors, I guess. But Tony, what would you say? Anything that you would add on that?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, you're not going to find two Kirk stands here on this particular podcast. I don't think either of us are big Kirk haters either. I just think we try to be realistic. I try to be realistic. I know Carson tries to be realistic. He is, and then the team at large, he is kind of the embodiment of what the Vikings are right now, which is there are some really incredible stats out there about this team and Kirk Cousins, and then there are a lot of very legitimate concerns about this team and Kirk Cousins. Do I think that level of play, the way of winning games, is sustainable? No, absolutely not. I mean, Carson and I talked about it when they were 5-1. We thought we're having fun because they're winning, but there's no way we can keep this up. And then they just kept coming in, and certainly we'll take it. I'm happy that the Vikings have had the success that they have. But look, the law of average just tells you that we're going to come back to the mean at some point. And unfortunately, that might start catching up with us now. Last year, we had the opposite problem. We were losing one-score games over and over and over and over again. And then it seemed like we just kind of flipped the script this year, had a lot of balls bounce our way, had some luck. We had some games that we backed into some wins, but there were
Buffalo.
also a lot of comeback wins. Yeah, Buffalo. There were also a lot of comeback wins where, you can't say that the Vikings didn't earn the win because they went and actually scored a touchdown or a field goal to win the game. They earned that, right? It's really just the defense. The defense is the biggest problem with this team. You take away the wins and the one-score wins and all this and the point differentials. The biggest issue with this team is the defense is about as strong as a wet napkin, Kevin. They cannot stop anyone. They can't stop anybody. So, and the offense, as talented as they are, they haven't been as dynamic as we'd hope they'd be. Yeah, sure, Justin Jefferson every once in a while does amazing things. But the offense at large, it's not like they're putting up 40 points a game. This isn't the greatest show on turf with the Rams. This is a team that is a good offense. I mean, statistically, right, I would say they're in the good category. Yeah. Not great. And when you pair that with a defense that basically looks like Swiss cheese every single week, you just can't win games.
Is that a Packers joke?
Well, yeah. You know what? I can't. I'm just going to get riled up. I already said what I needed to say on Twitter. So, look, at the end of the day, this team has holes. I'm excited about all the success this year. I think Kevin O'Connell has proven that he is a good coach. I'm excited about what he'll bring in the future. I think there's a lot to learn from. But no, to your point, not sustainable. I would expect the Vikings, if they were to run the same roster next year, this team that very well might end up 12-4 could be, 7-10 next year. I mean, it's that kind of a team and the way things go, but hopefully not. Hopefully they make some moves, and I'm sure they will.
So before I let Kevin back in here, here's the tweet. I wanted to get this right. So Phil Mackey's tweet about Kirk Cousins win leading since 2018, since he's been a Viking. Win leading, he is 32nd out of 53 quarterbacks in quarterback rating, 36th in yards per attempt, and 35th in completion percentage. When he's trailing, he's 10th in quarterback rating, 12th in yards per attempt, and 11th in completion percentage. And when the Vikings have been tied, first in QB rating, 7th in yards per attempt, and 2nd in completion percentage. So we wonder why the Vikings have played so many close games for the last several years, especially the last two. And I think that might be part of it. And he did mention, I think is a good ad, he says, Cousins was far more statistically effective with a lead between 2015 and 2017 in Washington, top 10 in all three of those categories. And so he basically then went in to say that Mike Zimmer's conservative approach has definitely played a role in that prior to this season. But does that answer your question,
Yes.
Kevin. It's interesting. I think we like Kirk Cousins, but we know that there are limitations with him, and I think that is why this team has a ceiling of not going too far in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean that's what we talk about all the time on our podcast when we do our Vikings preview episodes is, can Kirk show up this time, right? Can he win you the big game? There's the running joke about, 12 p.m. Kirk versus 3 p.m. Kirk or 7 p.m.
Yep.
Kirk. And it's so weird, but it's eerily true that when he's not playing at noon, he's a different player. And it's like,
Yep.
well, you're probably not going to play at noon in the playoffs. You know what I mean? You're going to be under the lights in the bigger moments, and it'll be interesting to see what he does this year. He hasn't really been able to come through in the past for you guys. We'll see if he can this year. But that's like, it's funny because we're terrified of the Vikings, the way we talk about them and the way we talk about their playmakers and the matchup of Justin Jefferson versus anyone, whether it's our best corner in Jalen Johnson or whether it's our young rookie in Kyler Gordon. He's going to get his, and Dalvin Cook and the threat that he poses to you, and now T.J. Hawkinson. But we always get back to that point of we're not scared of Kirk Cousins. We're not, we know he's good enough to beat you, but you don't fear him. You know what I mean? He doesn't strike fear into you as a fan of the opposing team watching him, and there are games where you come out of it saying, man, he played really well. And that's 100% true. And we'll acknowledge that when it happens. But the way we approach it most of the time, the way we approached it today when we record our podcast was, same thing. Like, they're going to put points on the board for sure, but we're not terrified of Kirk Cousins the same way we're terrified of Aaron Rodgers every single game we play against the Green Bay Packers. You know what I mean? Yeah, Kirk Cousins is a long way away from being Aaron Rodgers, but it's just that general point of we don't ever feel like in a majority of situations, if we were to lose the game to the Minnesota Vikings, it is because of Kirk Cousins. Usually it's chalked up to, well, Justin Jefferson is just better than your cornerbacks, or Dalvin Cook is just better than, your defensive front and their offensive line dominated you, or their defense just played better, right? We rarely will chalk it up to Kirk being the better quarterback that day. So that's just the way we see it as Bears fans, the way we, view Kirk Cousins. And, who knows? I mean, you guys are going to give him a fat contract extension. I mean, he's going to be there for a little while, don't you think? I mean, him and Justin Jefferson, they're going to be the tandem in there for a good while, I assume. So this isn't this matchup, Fields versus Cousins. Obviously, we won't see it this Sunday, but it'll probably be there for the next 3 years, I assume.
Tony, I'll let you go first on that.
Yeah, I think that there's a possibility that happens. I think we're going to know a lot this offseason because the way his contract is currently, if you were to bring in, if their intention is to bring in a protege, somebody that's young, obviously we're talking about drafting somebody possibly second, third round that they feel strongly about, now would be the time to do it because you'd have essentially 2 years for him to sit behind Kirk Cousins before they would need to essentially get off the pot. Now, this is the other thing. If you've got a guy you really believe in, you give him a year to sit behind Kirk, and then in the last year of Kirk's contract, I get that things can change, but let's just talk about teams right now. Look at the offseason, or this offseason. A team like the Jets. You can't tell me a team like the Jets with that defense wouldn't go and look at Kirk Cousins, as crazy as it sounds, and go, what could this team do with Kirk Cousins versus a Zach Wilson, right? I mean, they'd have a valid point, and a team that is structured like that, I think there'd be some temptation there. I'm not saying they're giving up the house for Kirk Cousins because they're going to be taking on a huge contract that's fully guaranteed for at least a year, but, I could see the Vikings doing that. I personally, the way I see it, is somebody's going to have to bite the bullet on the monetary side of things with the Vikings. That Jefferson contract, which I believe will come this offseason, is going to be massive. So
yes,
I've said on this podcast before, I think Dalvin's out. I think this is probably his last year in purple. I think from a talent standpoint, Thielen's out, but Carson brought up a great point on Sunday. His dead cap hit is through the roof, so he might be on the team just because you're really not saving any money by cutting him. But somebody's going to have to go. You can't keep all these players because that defense again is so bad that you're not going to be playing competitive football. So at that point, what's more important, building for the future and unloading the baggage now, or trying to tread water, for a few years and basically have zero cap space, but have a few massive contracts? I don't know. We'll know a lot this offseason.
Yeah, my thought is that the Vikings are internally planning as if Kirk Cousins is likely going to not be the quarterback after next season. I think 2023 will be his final season as the Vikings quarterback, unless they are very not confident in whoever they bring in. I am very, very certain they're going to bring in somebody to be a protege, as Tony mentioned, this offseason, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's a trade for Trey Lance, whether it's a trade for Zach Wilson, whoever it may be. I'm not fond necessarily of either one of those options, but I think they are going to bring in somebody who they think can be the quarterback after Kirk Cousins. Everybody's like, oh, well, they're bashing Kirk again. Oh, man. There's a lot of Kirk lovers that are not necessarily Vikings fans, by the way. I don't know if you were aware of that, Kevin, but there's a lot of people that are like, oh, well, there they go, trying to get rid of Kirk. Here's the thing. Kirk Cousins is 30. He's 34 years old right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to play forever. He's not going to be Tom Brady. I'm just going to tell everybody that right now. He's not going to be playing until he's 45 years old.
No.
And you have to be prepared as a franchise for the moment when your quarterback starts to go off a cliff. Like, you can't just sit back and say, oh, yeah, we're good. And then all of a sudden, the year has started and he's not as good as we thought he was going to be. What do we do now? Like, then you look at the situation that the Colts are in the last couple of years where they've gone to quarterbacks that haven't been as good and trying to fill that void. So that's why I think the Vikings need to prepare for that now and not wait for that moment to happen where the quarterback maybe even retires like Andrew Luck did. Be prepared because you never know when that time could come. So, I guess that's kind of my thoughts on the Kirk Cousins situation beyond this year.
Yeah, it makes total sense, man. I see where you guys are coming from. It's an interesting situation for sure for you guys.
Yeah. Well, let's very quickly, I know we're kind of getting close to probably time here, Kevin, but let's talk about the Vikings offense against the Bears defense. I know you said the Bears defense injuries and maybe isn't as good as you were hoping that they would be. I think you kind of said they were pretty bad this year. And so Justin Jefferson's probably a huge concern for you going into this game. I'm guessing Dalvin Cook maybe too with that defensive line, maybe not as strong as it once was, but what are your what are the number of concerns maybe that you have with this Vikings offense? And tell us a little bit about some of those defensive players for the Bears, maybe some of those rookies that have had a good impact.
Yeah, 100%. Look, this is one of the worst Bears defenses that I've watched since I've been alive. I mean, it is bad. They cannot stop anything. I mean, the past 2 weeks, it's been hopeless. Like, you just can't wait. I'm at the point where I'm just waiting for the other team to score. I want them to score faster so we can watch Justin Fields back on the field again. Because it's inevitable. They're going to score. It's just, let's just get it over with. I mean, it's that bad. They do have some young talent, right? They're missing Jalen Johnson, their young cornerback, who's going to get a big extension. You guys are obviously aware of him, the things he's done against Justin Jefferson in the past. He's going to get an extension this offseason. He'll be here for at least 3-4 more years. Eddie Jackson,
really
obviously.
Yep.
Yeah, he's great. Eddie Jackson, kind of came back into his own this year, had, I think, 4, maybe 5 interceptions before going out for IR. But you look at the rookies, man, and those are Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. And Jaquan Brisker, man, that's a name you guys are going to have to remember because that kid is good. Again, I remember, we talked to his trainer, is a good friend of mine now. says the kid's ceiling could be an all-pro, up to be, obviously his trainer's going to say, as he said, he thinks he could be a Hall of Famer. Yeah, that's probably a slower roll on that. Of course, his trainer will say that. But they have a lot of young talent, man. I mean, these young guys, what they looked for in all of them was we want athletes who are quick, who are fast, who fly to the ball, and who are prone to get takeaways. And you started to see that. Jaquan Brister's gotten a number of takeaways this year. He's got a couple interceptions, a bunch of forced fumbles. And then Kyler Gordon recently, he intercepted, I believe, both Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. So he kind of came into his own against two of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he's going to be, making plays around the ball. He'll be lined up against Justin Jefferson in slot situations. But aside from those two guys, I mean, the Bears really have nothing on defense. They got some guys at linebacker who have played well. Nicholas Morrow has been a good signing for them this year. Matt Adams was a good pickup, just as a waiver wire guy. But it really starts with the defensive front, man, and that front four. This defense is one of the worst that I've seen since I've been alive. This front four, easily the worst that I've seen since I've been alive. I mean, they have no ability to rush the passer. Obviously they traded Robert Quinn, but even when Robert Quinn was here, he was not much of a factor. And I thought the Bears absolutely fleeced the Eagles by getting a fourth rounder out of a guy who's that old and virtually non-productive at all. This season he got injured in Philadelphia, and it looks like he's probably going to play, none, if not maybe a few snaps in the playoffs for the Eagles. But man, they cannot apply any pressure at all. And, even if you do have talent in the secondary, they got to cover these guys all day. When you got guys as talented as, A.J. Brown and Stephon Diggs and now Justin Jefferson coming here on Sunday, it's tough for them, man, because Kirk is going to roll. He's going to get all the time in the world, and even if nobody's open now, he'll roll out, and then somebody will get open. And that's been the root of all the defensive issues for the Bears is, the lowest pressure rate in the NFL, least amount of sacks in the NFL. They cannot do anything. And, of course, the opposing offense can also run on them anytime they want, so then that opens up anything that they want to do in the pass game. It's abysmal, man. Like, it's fun to see the takeaways that happen every once in a while because this is the reason that Eberflus was brought in, and this is what he's great at. He was top 10 in takeaways with the Colts, all 3 years that he was a defensive coordinator, and he brought this mentality to the defense that, hey, we're going to go after the football and be looking for a takeaway on every play, and that's actually been pretty good considering the lack of talent there. But as far as the stopping a team moving down the field, they just got nothing, man. They just got nothing. And it's not a scheme thing. It's not a coaching thing. It's just an obvious lack of talent, specifically at that front four. So my message to you, there is absolutely nothing to be worried about. You'll be just fine. Justin Jefferson should put up 100 yards in the first half. Bad news defense for us here.
Well, the good news, and maybe bad news because you want the first overall pick.
True.
The good
Correct.
news is for the Bears defensive front is that the Vikings entire right side of the offensive line is not good because Brian O'Neill is now on IR, who has become one of the best right tackles in the league, I can say. And Ed Ingram has literally been the worst offensive lineman in the league this year, statistically, according to what PFF has put out. And we have our third string center going in this game as well in Chris Reed. So I'm not totally convinced that the Bears defensive line is going to be dominated in this game. But I will say it does help for the Vikings to maybe get those players a little bit of confidence, potentially. Or maybe it'll be the Bears defensive line getting some confidence against some of those players. But that's the part that does scare me. Those young players, the Vikings are probably going to have to design some shorter, quick throws, not just in this game, but going into the postseason to get the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands quickly, because I have a bad feeling about that right side of the offensive line going forward. But Tony, looks like we're maybe losing him here a second, but let's go ahead quick, Kevin, and talk a little bit about the Bears offense versus the Vikings defense. Obviously, we mentioned Nathan Peterman in that matchup. I think, to me, the biggest matchups that are concerning for the Vikings to keep an eye on are probably Chase Claypool, if he plays, and Cole Kmet. And then Darnell Mooney, we know he's been a pretty decent receiver at times as well, but is Nathan Peterman even going to be able to get those guys the ball? And then, of course, we know your running game is pretty solid, but go ahead.
Yeah, Donald Mooney's on IR, so you don't have to worry about him. He
Okay.
got put on IR a couple weeks ago. Chase Claypool has been virtually non-existent for us. He just hasn't really. I don't know if he's had a trouble grasping the playbook or they're not comfortable trotting him out in a lot of these situations. No one really knows. He hasn't been on the field a lot, and when he's been on the field, he hasn't been given the ball. And he showed that frustration last week. He actually threw his helmet on the sideline, and Justin Fields had to come up to him and tell him, hey, we don't do that here. We're not doing those antics the way he did them in Pittsburgh. So that was a cool leadership moment from Justin. But no, you don't have to be worried about about Chase Claypool. Really, the only thing you have to be worried about is the rushing offense. I mean, as bad as the offensive line has been, they've actually been pretty good as a rush blocking unit. Bears are, I believe, I haven't checked in weeks. I got to imagine they're still number one in the NFL in rushing. Obviously, Fields the leading rusher as a quarterback, and that's the main reason why they're one of the best rushing teams in the NFL. But Khalil Herbert was on IR. He came back last week. He's healthy again, so you'll have a heavy dose of Khalil Herbert and Dave Montgomery in this game. I was talking in our podcast before this. They might run the ball 55 times in this game. I mean that's their only option. They're not going to have the ball enough to even run it that many times, I imagine. But the thing about Luke, if there's one thing to say about Luke Getsy's been fine this year. But if there's one thing that we've noticed is he's extremely conscious of what he's working with. So people wonder, well, why are they not throwing the football with Justin Fields more? Why is he running so much? And a lot of the reasons to why is because Luke Getsy's not an idiot. He knows that he cannot keep Justin Fields in the pocket for more than 2.5 seconds or he's going to be gobbled up. And there's been weeks where he's kept him in the pocket and everyone's like, well, what the hell are you doing? But for the most part, he's been on the run. He's been designing runs for Justin Fields. He's been rolling them out because he knows how bad that offensive line is. So now you put a quarterback in there who has no choice but to stay in the pocket, right? He can't roll out. You can't run a designed run for Nathan Peterman. I'm really interested to see how he runs, how he calls this game, right? I mean, we saw this with Trevor Siemian back when Justin Fields was out against the New York Jets, and the Bears, I think, lost that game 31-10. It was not close. They did a lot of quick stuff. They did a lot of short stuff, get the ball out quickly, but in that game, I think they had an effort mentality, and this is one of the a couple games after Chase Claypool was traded to the Bears. They were saying, F it, let's just throw it down the field. They threw a couple deep balls to Chase Claypool. He only caught one of them. But I wouldn't be surprised if they come out this year and this week, it's week 18. We have nothing to play for. We want to lose. Just chuck it down there. Just chuck it down. See what you have in Chase Claypool. Because right now, we just talked about this. If the Bears end up with the number one overall pick, then that pick that they traded to Baltimore is going to essentially end to Pittsburgh for Chase Claypool. I'm getting this all wrong. They traded away, for Chase Claypool. My apologies. It's going to end up being a first-round pick because the Miami Dolphins forfeited their first-round pick because of the whole tampering scandal or whatever. That's going to end up being pick number 32. So when you look at the value now for Chase Claypool, it's not there. So you are looking for what you have out of him, and recency bias is real. If you can go into the offseason after a Week 18 performance where he at least catches 4 passes, you're feeling a little bit better about the value you are getting out of that trade. So, I think they might just say screw it, but I would imagine that a majority of the offensive play calling is going to be geared toward the rushing attack, and it's going to be Dave Montgomery's last game as a Bear for all we know. So maybe they'll do him good. And honestly, by do him good, I think they mean they might just sit him. Don't let him get hurt. Let Khalil Herbert run the show. Do good by Dave Montgomery. Don't hurt him before free agency. Something like that.
He's a free agent. Okay.
Yeah, he's going to be a free agent, so they're going to definitely not re-sign him. They either going to run with Khalil Herbert or get one of the other million free agent running backs that are out there this offseason. It's actually incredible how many guys are available. Or draft somebody. That's my option in the 6th round or something. Cole Kmet's a guy. Keep your eye on him. He's a threat in the red zone. But other than that, man, again, you got nothing to worry about. Our offensive line is also heavily depleted. They're going to be starting Alex Leatherwood, I believe, at left guard. So that'll be interesting to monitor as well.
Well, I know who one guy will be available is I guarantee Alexander Madison will be available, and I don't think I'd like to have to face him 2 times a year in the revenge game because he'll be a unrestricted free agent after this year, and there's no way the Vikings will re-sign him. Not because he's not good, it's just because I think again they're going to be in a situation where they have to look for guys that are on rookie deals. You know, they're going to have to. I guarantee the Vikings will be looking to have a more running back by committee approach with some cheaper backs because they just can't afford them, and that's the same reason why Dalvin I think will be gone. That could be an intriguing. Now that I think about it, intriguing pickup. Boy, I hope you guys don't get Madison.
He's good,
but
man.
he deserves it. He deserves to go somewhere to be a number one, and that's why he won't want to stay either. You know, he's going to want to go somewhere to be a number one running back on somebody's roster, or at least compete for a number one spot. He's never going to be that on the Vikings as long as Dalvin's here. So, you know.
True.
Yeah, I would not give, like, if Madison wants to stay, like the Vikings. If I'm the Vikings, I wouldn't give him more than $3 to $4 million a year because I don't think he's. I mean, he's been good when he's played, but I don't think he's proven enough to be able to say, in my opinion, that you're worth this much. You know, and I think with the value of running backs going down over the last several years, I think that will possibly lead to a running back market that goes down as well. We'll have to wait and see, but. That would be my prediction, and I like the idea of the Vikings going by a running back by committee approach and focus more of their draft talent and free agency talent on offensive line, defense, and other areas that are more important than running backs. Because running back is a pretty easy position to find nowadays in the draft or UDFAs, whatever you want to say. So. But let's get into our game predictions. I know, Kevin, we probably kept you way longer than you wanted to, but appreciate you sticking it out here with us. Let's get Tony's thoughts on the game. I know he didn't give much thoughts on the game itself, but Tony, any thoughts you want to give about the game and your overall prediction here?
Yeah, well, first off, Kevin, thank you for joining the podcast. This is the Purple Hostage podcast that we're just keeping you for longer than the time allotted. No, look, my prediction is I think the Vikes are going to win, only because Kevin pointed it out. I think it's in the Bears' best interest to lose this game, and it's not like they're actively going to try to lose. They're just going to set the chess pieces out and see where things kind of fall. That's kind of how I see this game going. I do think it's going to end up being a little bit of a tighter game than we want it to be because the Vikings may decide to sit starters in the second half, and we could have a 12th one-score win just for, giggles, if you will. But, I don't know. My prediction, if I'm going scores, Vikings 24, Bears 19.
All right, you think the Bears are going to score 19 points?
It's a weird score, but it's going to be weird. That's all I'm saying.
Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I got Vikings 31-13, man. I think it would be like 45-13, but I do think that you'll get a big lead and you'll take away the starters at the second half. Maybe you'll keep your eye on some of the other games going around if the 49ers are winning, big, no reason for it to even try, right? You'll see what happens, but something stupid's going to happen. The Bears are going to, do something in the fourth quarter. Maybe someone breaks off a big run. I don't. That's the only way I think they get to 13 points with Nathan Peterman is, they get lucky in some sort of capacity. Maybe they get a takeaway, get the ball in their in Vikings territory close to the end zone where they don't have to trek down the field. So I'll go Vikings 31-13. And the last thing I'll say, I got to say this while I'm on the Vikings podcast, I am all aboard Justin Jefferson for MVP. I think he should be the MVP, and I hate how it's become a quarterback's award. It frustrates the hell out of me. That guy is going to be on the cover of Madden, but he 100% deserves to at least be in the conversation as MVP, and it's stupid that he's not. So that's my my thing here for as I head out.
Yeah, I will say I think if Jefferson would have showed out last week, I would have probably given him the MVP.
That's true.
But I think with the performance he had against the Packers, I'm kind of like, but I know it wasn't just his fault. But that's a whole nother debate for another time. I'm going Vikings. I had 26-10. I'm kind of a little worried this game's going to be closer than it should. But I'm going 26-10 Vikings with the win. And I agree. I think they'll be pulling some of their starters at some point. And maybe the Bears get a little closer towards the end with to make it a 2-possession game, technically with 2-point conversions. But 26-10, weird scores only, right? Right, Tony. So we'll go with that. And 26-10 Vikings with the win. Kevin, we can follow your podcast at Bears Nation Pod. You're the host of that on Twitter. You can find that and then listen to the show. Tell our audience where they can go for all of your shows and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Bears Nation Pod on all of our platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and on YouTube as well. You guys can check us out there. Appreciate you guys having me on, man. It was a lot of fun being here with you guys. You guys are nice Vikings fans. I've talked to a lot of Vikings fans who are not so nice. So I appreciate the respect, the mutual respect we have here. And yeah, it should be a good one. But it's fun being here with you guys.
Yeah. No, I appreciate having you on. And Tony, always good to have you on as well. And of course, we thank everybody for watching this episode of the Skol Purple podcast. And we're looking forward to the postseason, which will probably be playing the Giants. The Vikings, very good chance they'll be playing the Giants in the first round of the postseason. But once again, appreciate everybody for tuning in. And as always, I know we probably won't get Kevin to say it here, but we always say Skol as we close the show. So Skol.
Let's go.